You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
Hey, strap in.
Jesus. So pumped.
I
thought you had coffee, but you haven't got coffee.
No, but I have just eaten 3 Bourbon biscuits back to back, like into my mouth.
If you were in any doubt about how hardcore we are,
Bourbons. Yeah.
Set us up.
And a cup of rooibos.
It's a lovely Devon day. The birds are singing.
Yeah. Bit chills.
Yes, but
Bit
not as
cold.
windy as it has been. We had a bit of wind this week.
No, this is true.
Oh, a crow.
A dead crow?
Not a dead crow.
I've got a dead crow in my boot.
Of course you have.
I actually have. Which I picked up this morning because my crow problem has come back.
People know about your crow problem. I mean, have you been to see a doctor?
Some people know about the crow problem. Is, to cut a long story short, crows tapping on my upstairs windows.
Crows ritually
at sunrise.
worshipping your house.
Yeah, and waking me up. So I open my eyes to a noise, and there's a crow just staring at me through the window, going like that on the window. And someone told me that if you hang a dead crow in the window, then they go, "Oh no, they kill crows," and they go away. So I passed a dead crow in the road today, so I reversed for quite a long time as well. I saw the crow, drove past it, listen to the radio.
Were you thinking
clock,
the
clock,
whole
clock.
time?
Should I pick up the crow? I should have. Oh, I'm never going to get this chance again. Fate has landed this dead crow in my lap. I'm going to take it. So I reversed, picked up the dead crow in a bag, and it's there. I'm going to try it and let you know on next week's episode of Wem's Crow Problem.
Crow chat.
Yeah.
Cool. So, straight into it.
Let's do it.
Because this book has already thrown up so many questions in my head. You read it first.
Yeah.
And you read it. I'm going to say you read it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put loads of post-its on it. And you went like, read this bit, maybe leave out this chapter, don't worry about that. So that was like incredibly helpful. I have read it at a surface level, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But not in any great depth. So this might be me asking you lots of questions. You going, yeah, that's in the book.
That's fine.
But yeah, so
I might also go, I don't remember that bit.
The book is The Play Cycle: Theory, Research and Application, by Pete King and Gordon Sturrock.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
So play cycles are your jam, aren't they?
They are. Play ludicology.
Ludicology.
Play stuff. So a bit of a background to the book. If you don't know about the play cycle, it was a thing. You can't say invented because if you say it exists, then it's not invented by anybody. But a term coined by Perry Else and Gordon Sturrock. So Perry Else, they're both passed away now, but obviously Perry Else died, and then Gordon Sturrock was alive to write this bit of this book with Pete King. And we saw Pete King talking at the Play Forum in Somerset a couple of years ago now. So I think he'd just finished the research for this book when we saw him speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a couple of years I was like, oh, okay, we must buy this book. And then it was like £1 million.
You were like fangirling hard.
I know.
When we saw him, and it was.
I'm over that now. It's fine.
I think we talked about it when we talked about I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but there's a room of people, and it was the Play Forum, so lots of people who work in nurseries, lots of people with, like, I would say, a surface level interest in play, in setting up mud kitchens, in doing
is, like, they were
thing.
play workers, but because a play work qualification is so hard to come by these days, they don't necessarily have the sort of deep.
Yeah, but there were like
knowledge of it.
3 or 4 bits of like Pete King standing at the front and being like, has anybody heard of the California paper? And then like one hand next to me, fucking Hermione Granger shooting her hand up. I have, Professor!
Ask me the answer. I know the answer. Yeah.
Every time. And then it became a slight joke because when he was talking then about things that we'll come on to later, like the metaludes and the whatever else, and he just kept turning back to you and being like, of course, and you know, I do, Professor.
Oh well,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm not mocking you for
you can mock
being
me.
interested.
No,
it's like
you can
it's
mock
amazing
my
to see
nerdness.
someone passionate about any little niche. I think it doesn't matter what the niche is.
Yeah,
Someone's really passionate about it. I will listen to someone talk about
Special
like,
interest.
you know, oyster diving in like the Maldives or something. If they're like
Mario Kart.
Or Mario Kart. There we go.
Yeah.
We'll listen to someone whose special interest is Mario Kart.
Yeah, quite
for a long
recently.
time.
So Gordon Sturrock and Perry Ellis came up with the idea of the play cycle in a paper called the Colorado Paper in 1998, and it has since become a kind of established part of play work. But this book is kind of written by Pete King because there has been no empirical study of its kind of use or understanding. So Pete King wanted to, part of the book is about assessing current play workers' understanding of the play cycle, and he kind of did a bit of an audit of books and play work qualifications to see how is the play cycle presented, and for example part of the play cycle is the metalude, and was that defined in the same way across textbooks and something, and it wasn't. And so he's like, well, this has kind of got a bit maybe diluted,
kind of trying to unifying a field.
Yeah, or like to find out, like, you know, this is since 1998, no one's really kind of taken it forward since then. It's sort of become quite diluted. So part of the book is sort of examining that, and then also Gordon Sturrock has a chapter in the book where he reflects on sort of developing the play cycle, and then where play work has gone since, and the future of play work, which I found like super interesting. There's a woodpecker being really bolshy. Don't know if that comes across on the recording. And the book is kind of talking a lot about like the current state of play work and its future, and there's a quote from Bob Hughes in it saying that in the 70s there was a sort of shift from being a play leader to a play worker, and a kind of turn to scientific literature to underpin practice. And there's a bit of an argument for research-based practice in the book, and saying if you're going to be a good play worker, it's not really enough to just like rock up and like play with kids and design some cool play equipment. It's all about actually having some sort of knowledge to underpin that, and that has kind of been lost a bit, or hasn't continued in the way that maybe Perry Ellis and Gordon Sturrock hoped that it would.
Okay.
Yeah, so where should we start after that kind of
Well, there was a good definition of... So, obviously lots of this relates to play working. And I picked up on... I think it's one... We've talked about play working before, but this might be the first episode somebody listens to. So, the 8 play worker principles are as follows. 1. All children and young people need to play. The impulse to play is innate. Play is biological, psychological, and a social necessity, and is fundamental to the healthy development and well-being of individuals and communities. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, we did
Links
a whole
very closely with-
episode on the play work principles versus the Forest School.
Well, not versus, it was kind of comparing and contrasting,
together,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Okay, so number 2, play is a process that is freely chosen. Freely chosen is important. Personally directed and intrinsically motivated. That is, children and young people determine and control the content and intent of their play by following their own instincts, ideas and interests in their own way and for their own reasons. Number 3, the prime focus and essence of play work is to support and facilitate the play process, and this should inform the development of play policy, strategy, training and education. Number 4, for play workers, the play process takes precedent, and play workers act as advocates for play when engaging with adult-led agendas. Again, very important. Number 5, the role of the play worker is to support all children and young people in the creation of a space in which they can play. And number 6, the play worker's response to children and young people playing is based on a sound, up-to-date knowledge of the play process and reflective practice. Number 7, play workers recognise their own impact on the play space and also the impact of children and young people's play on the play worker. So, two-way street. And number 8, play workers choose an intervention style that enables children and young people to extend their play. All play worker intervention must balance risk with the developmental benefit and well-being of children. So that's a brief, if nobody's come across play working, as we've said before, kind of some of them are on the same lines as Forest School, some of them are extensions, some of them are maybe things that are unwritten. And
it depends on your personal Forest School ethos and style, doesn't it? So for me, that is a list of our job for me. And I think probably our practice aligns with all of those play. I can't think of a single. Can you think of a play work principle there that we go, oh yeah, no, that's not so important for us?
I mean, only in the specifics of sound up-to-date knowledge on the play process. And I would say...
Well, that's why we're doing this, man.
That's why we're doing this. But to be a forest school leader, you don't necessarily have to have a deep understanding of play.
Yeah.
You might...
You should.
All right.
But
get ready for like an hour of me going, okay.
But, okay, depending on what board you, accrediting body you train with. So
for forest school,
yes. We're most familiar with OCN and Ascentis. We did ours with, that was ages ago. And you know, play is in there in your coursework. You have to write about some stuff about play. And what is that? There's so many animals.
It's a woodpecker. He's knocking about. I think he's trying to build up the courage to come down to this bird feeder.
It's very distracting. If you could please kindly stop. Oh yeah, he just played Peepo around the tree. Oh hello. It's probably after some. Yeah, I can see him. Yeah. So you know, if you have done your training, then it would be part of your training, part of your coursework, to really think hard about this stuff.
I think it's the thing that, like, for most people, they start, and because tools and knots and like the bushcraft side of forest school is new and scary to lots of people, that's where your attention goes. And then maybe the longer you do it, the more people move into like,
that's true, this
is an ethos. Oh right, it's actually more about this. And
I think that's true. And in your own practice, all of the kind of practical, logistical, physical things take precedence, don't they? Like, oh my god, I've never been out in the woods.
You found the bird feeder.
In a crazy
well done, mate.
Yeah, wow, beautiful.
Very colourful. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, you know, you've never been in the woods on a windy, horrible day with a group of kids, and they want
immediate
to do
needs, isn't
axing
it?
right now. And then when you've done a lot of that stuff, then you start really like observing the play, and then you can't, you know, in my view, you can't help but be fascinated in the play cycles that are happening. Yeah. So I'll give like a really brief overview of the play cycle. So it starts with the play cue, which is a sign from the child to the universe, or vice versa, that the child is ready to play. Well, actually, it doesn't start with the play cue. It starts with the metalude, or the pre-cue, which is the kind of slightly kind of daydreamy state that's happening in the inner world of the child before a play cue happens. And then the play cue could be something from the inner world of the child to the outside world, like picking up a pine cone and throwing it, or it could be something from the universe to the child, like a leaf falling down from a tree and landing on their shoulder. And then the play return is then either the universe or another creature, another human, whatever, returning the play cue, so that then play continues. So an example of that would be, I don't know,
you've got a stick and you jump in front of someone and you go, aha! That's the play cue. The return is that person either then going, huh? And walking away. That would not be a play. That'd be annihilation. Yeah. Right? That's the right word. Yeah. But the return would be if you then went, oh, aha! And picked up your own stick. That's the return.
And then, so if that continues, then loop and flow is the next stage, where play cue, play return, play cue, like a game of tennis, keeps on going. And then that can end either in annihilation, where it's like it fizzles out, or something happens from the universe that means that it's the sort of loop and flow is ended, or it can be adulterated, so that is like usually an adult coming in and going, it's time for tea, you've got to stop, or there
was a really good definition. I'm going to try and do it from memory because I can't find the page, and it was like adulteration is either domination, attempting to teach or educate, or, and I thought this was interesting, forcing their own unplayed material. Oh yeah. So like going like, this is interesting to me. Hey, I'm gonna be and like that's something that you have to kind of catch yourself doing when you go like, hey, the kids are into pirates, and if you slip into that like, I'm also a pirate, then the kids fizzle out, and you kind of go, I'm bigger than you. You're actually going to carry on playing pirates with me because I'm going to keep running up. You know. Yeah. It's very interesting.
It's really interesting, and that kind of reminds me of a bit in the book where Sturrock is talking about the stance of the Colorado paper, and like why they wrote it and what mindset they were in when they wrote it. And he says, we wanted to reposition and de-privilege the adult-centered authority of the therapist and refocus and highlight the self-healing potentials of children's playing. So, as I said, if psychotherapy is an archaeology of insisted neurosis situated in childhood trauma, take a moment to unpick that. If psychotherapy is an archaeology of insisted neurosis situated in childhood trauma,
right,
then play workers are engaging in neurosis as it's being formed and played out. You get it? So
yes.
You go in therapy as an adult and it's all like, oh, childhood trauma, let's unpick this. It's become insisted, it's like, really ingrained in you. Then play workers are actually working therapeutically with children as they may be experiencing the childhood trauma in other aspects of their life, or whatever. Hopefully not experiencing the trauma in the play space, but then maybe they are through
stuff not played, cues not being returned, through social things that happen.
Exactly.
You can't control it and go, everything is perfect.
Exactly.
When children meet.
Yeah.
That's just not possible.
Exactly. So they were noticing that with a kind of they say that when the Colorado paper was written, there was a move to get mothers back into the workforce, which led to a rise in paid-for childcare and more early years education. Right. So more formalised early years stuff, rather than you're just at home playing with your parents, and very much in these times, mum. Mm-hmm. And so they noticed this, which is obviously encroaching then on children's free play, they believed. So that's why they kind of wanted to forefront the importance of children's play and go, look, this is seriously important, not just for kind of development and learning that we might get in early, typical early years education. You might go, they're learning through play, but they're going, this is important therapeutically. This is kind of preventing the need for serious
from a humanist point of view of being a member of society, being a functioning human. This is important stuff. Not because it progresses them in literacy or maths or anything like that. It's just about having a solid mental state, having a solid,
And you can see that if you ride with that belief that play workers are really flipping important for that reason, you are working therapeutically with children in their own space, while they are children, you're preventing the need for therapy and preventing mental health issues further down the line. Then, if you go with that, you can see how really bloody important it is, and it is a different job to being an early years educator in the current climate, unfortunately, I believe. So you can see why back in the day Playwork was right, we are gonna have loads of funding and we're gonna do this, it's gonna be amazing, and then it all just fizzled out.
But it kind of links to the stuff that we were talking about in Dewey, about focusing on future outcomes versus in the moment outcomes, in the sense that it's easier to go playworking needs to sort of be phased out, because if they struggle through but they do literacy at age 4, then they'll be better at their GCSEs at 16, rather than going okay, they're 4, so what do they need to be a functioning healthy 4-year-old, socially, emotionally, spiritually, all those things.
And in the book, Sturrock, in his chapter, talks about sort of how play work could survive, and he's talking about first of all, he's talking about why it's important that you might not necessarily think about. So he has this argument that play is political, and we have done a podcast on this as well, haven't we? Democratic play, but he's basically saying that. Oh, what's the amazing quote? The creation of playing, governed by rules and their disputation, the challenges of governance between the children and attendant play workers, are the first glimmerings of grammars of power. So he's talking about the politics of it, and it's just what we talk about in that democratic play thing. So if you're making up rules, you're negotiating, you're going, oh, okay, well, we're playing this chasing game, but so and so is only 4, or they can't run as fast, so we're going to adapt things to all of those kind of things that are just happening all the time. You're it is a bird festival.
There's an absolute Disney film going on behind you. There's a squirrel running around in the mud kitchen. There are 2 crows sat just above the mud kitchen. There's a woodpecker flying around. There's cold tits and blue tits everywhere. I'm half expecting you to just go and have them all descend upon you. Apologise, I've interrupted your.
That's fine.
It struck one of the things that you said when you were reading the book before you So we got one copy and you read it and then you gave it to me. And you said every time I tried to start highlighting or start making a note, and you just realised that you can't say it any more succinctly than this, and you just end up highlighting like a whole page.
Yeah,
because
I've got 7 pages of notes and I realised I was copying out the whole book.
Yeah.
It's just not ideal.
But it is if it gets it into your...
This is true.
But I think it's worth saying, like, that's the type of book this is. Like, it's very well written. It's very well explained. There's lots of technical vocabulary in it.
Yeah, there's some meaty sentences.
There's some real meaty
like,
sentences
whoa,
that are like...
I have to stop and look up that word.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And I wrote... One of the notes I wrote down for this whole book is, I am only just competent enough to read this book. And I would say...
You and your ZPD.
I think I'm right at the end. This is like just creeping into my ZPD. I think if... And only because I read it at a surface level. If I tried to read it at a deeper level, I think I would have really struggled.
Yeah.
So...
Did you read the Gordon Sturrock chapter where he's talking about, like, so that's got some of the meatiest stuff in it, but then when you get to the bits which are easy to understand, you're like, yeah, crusade, like like really kind of stirring and going like, this is how we're going to get play work to survive, and talking about, and it again links to Dewey, and he's kind of saying like, just carrying on going, oh, we're not a classroom, we're not education, like that isn't enough to justify. You can't justify yourself by what you're not. You can't just go, well, we're not that and therefore we're really important. You have to really define why is it important and how are you going to survive. And so he's talking about like exporting the ideas of play work to other fields, and kind of...
There's a lot of stuff about alliances.
Yes, yeah. So that really like lit up loads of light bulbs for me about aligning with the Commons movement, because again that links to...
Do you want to explain what the Commons movement is?
Yeah. So, oh darn it! Now his name has gone out of my brain.
We'll find it. We'll put a link to the book.
So talking about common land, common movement, kind of.
As in shared land.
That's a shared. Thing according to needs, you know, not landowner going, no, private, keep out.
Yeah.
Doing things locally in a community. And he's saying that there's a lot of alignment between play work and the Commons movement, because there's no single authority but numerous centres of activity where individuals and groups offer distinctive and alternative kind of dialogues. Which is play, isn't it? You've got like, if you took a kind of snapshot of a play space with the play workers, the children of different ages, all the rest of it, bonk, it's like a kind of society in microcosm, and the way that it is run is very much as democratic as you can get it. It's very like, we're going to respect everybody's views, we're going to go with what people want to do. It's not top down, it's not autocratic, and that's very similar to the Commons movement, which is kind of growing through Extinction Rebellion, through Right to Roam movement, all these kind of things, going, well, actually, maybe the way that we're going to solve a lot of the planet's problems right now is through doing it on this kind of local scale and together, with no sort of line of authority like that. Which I thought was really interesting. And then he does talk about, did you get the bit where he is basically talking indirectly about Forest School? So he doesn't name Forest School.
I saw there's a bit that was like the play worker movement is becoming, or he thought it was like too insular, and there's a bit where he's kind of going, we need to like look at outside ideas and start to bring them in, which is a thing that, from my limited understanding and experience with the play worker community, it does feel like there's this thing of like, in wanting to protect something that people feel is really special, it blocks out anything that might come in to aid it, to make it...
You could probably say the same about Forest School.
Absolutely,
you? As that kind of like, well, no, but we've got the best idea, and the way we do things is the way we do things. And a lot of kind of adventure playgrounds historically have been in urban environments, with a lot of kind of like man-made materials and tools available for children and young people to build their own playgrounds with man-made stuff. And he's kind of going, hang on a minute, he kind of describes reading Murray Bookchin, who I've never heard of before this book, but reading Murray Bookchin and going, oh right, okay, hang on, yeah, like humans have evolved alongside nature and the natural world, and play work has been focused largely on what Murray Bookchin calls second nature, which is so first nature being biological nature, we are humans of planet Earth. Second nature is all about human culture and development and like human created systems and things. And he's saying that play work has historically been situated in second nature spaces, whereas he's going, actually, we need to be linking to the natural world, especially now. And he asks, would your typical play worker necessarily know that a playground or play space was south facing? Do we know what biological elements our play spaces have? I was like, yes, that is it. That's exactly it. Like, that is forest school for me. It's like play work, but in the natural world. And then we talk quite a lot, don't we, about kind of balancing how many man-made things you bring into the space and how much of that second nature stuff, which I guess things like acting out Shakespeare on the stage, all that kind of, that's all like second nature stuff, but in a first nature space, I suppose. Yeah. But I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. One of the notes that I made, because I thought it was very, very interesting, as a personal experiment that I've done, because with a large sample size of 2 children that I've had.
Oh yeah.
So he's talking about the play cues in the play cycle, and saying that there's the metalude, which is the kind of like thought, ethereal, hey thing. Yeah. And then it goes off and does the play cue, and then does whatever. So he then describes, and it's only very briefly, how non-verbal children. So I'm just gonna say non-verbal because I think he specifically mentions children with like learning disabilities, but I think it applies to other things as well. Yeah. And he says, so normally the play cue is made by the first player, the person who's had the player. Yeah. But what he then says is like non-verbal children, essentially, need an adult to verbalise the play cue for it to continue. Which is a very interesting thing to kind of think about. Like, so he's kind of saying, this is what I'm kind of pitching it at you as a like, have I understood this? Children who are non-verbal can't do play without a verbal presence, whether that's an older child or an adult. Is that what he's asserting?
I would doubt that that's what he's asserting.
Because it says that adults need adults to verbalise the play cue for it to continue, to avoid decaying.
I guess if he's talking about a non-verbal child playing with verbal children, because a non-verbal child could be playing by themselves, for example, with something, or even...
That's what I thought. So I was thinking about my 18-month-old. Yeah. And thinking she does lots of play on her own, and it's like very exploratory play, very like bash, poke that thing, and throws it on the floor.
Is she an Ewok?
Yes, you've met her. She's a very silent Ewok. But that thing that like, so when you read it, that kind of implies that the play cue can't happen if you're not in some way verbal, and I wondered if I've misunderstood.
I don't think that can be true.
Something.
But even
okay, so
even
here we go.
Yeah, go on, read the bit, because I would argue that even verbal.
Right, I'll read the sentence.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Not all children are able to be in control of their play. Interesting sentence already, right? You could unpick just the first time. Not all children are able to be in control of their play, particularly children with profound and multiple learning difficulties, PMLDs. A study undertaken by Smith, 2017, with staff who work with children with multiple learning difficulties, found that due to a lack of verbal communication from the children, it was important for the adult to initiate the play cue. Smith found that the play cycle was a useful link between Bastian's idea of meta-communication and building playful relationships. So this idea that the adult has to do the play cue if there are children who are non-verbal.
He's not just saying non-verbal though, is he?
He's saying due to the lack of verbal communication from the children, that the adult has to do the play cue. So there's something there that when I read it, I was like,
Well, I guess if you add sort of the multiple learning difficulties, including being non-verbal, would mean that being unable or finding it difficult to express yourself either verbally or physically
right,
together would make it very hard to get from the internal
I see. So
world
if you haven't
of the
got verbal
child.
stuff, but you have got physical communication to fall back on,
Yes.
that might be...
Yeah, if you have good physical control, then you are able to kind of externalize your internal world. But if you haven't got ready access to either of those things, then how do you...
Well, because then it got me thinking about how many of the... Just reading that, you might think that the play cues are predominantly verbal because an adult has to verbalise them, or children who can verbalise them. And I was like, my understanding of play cues is that play cues are anything from a look to a throwing something at someone.
Yeah,
so that's interesting, isn't it? That like he's saying that these children needed adults to verbalise the play cue, to go, which I think sometimes is what you and I do. To help children understand, particularly neurodiverse children, either to explain a neurodiverse play cue to the group and go, when she's doing that, she's playing, or like I think Mike is actually trying to say this,
Definitely.
and maybe we're not
I'm
saying
sure
it the right way.
That's exactly what I think is
So
going on
that's
there.
the interpretation that I'm kind of taking of it,
Yeah.
is that sometimes we act as translators
Yes.
for play cues one way or another between
the players.
whether they're both neurodivergent, whether
Yeah.
one is neurodivergent,
Yes,
play receiver, play cue.
that's how I would take it to be as well. Through knowing that child
Yeah.
very well and through working with them a lot, you are able to be, the translator. Yeah, definitely.
And then there's another bit later on. I feel like I'm like really interviewing about this, but I'm kind of...
Yes.
I feel like I should
I'm ready to answer any
do
question.
Like a Parkinson thing.
Yeah.
So talking about play cues in the animal world. Really interesting.
Love it.
As I've said before, the hell was that?
That's a crow.
Okay. Is it dead?
No, it's not in my boot. It's live.
What did I say? Oh yeah. Okay. So, animal world. The whole like non-verbal communication is my jam. Body language, all this stuff. I find it really incredible. And he's talking about, so rodents will bite on the nape of the neck when it's a play, and they will bite on the rump when it's not play. He says primates will approach another primate wide-eyed, open-mouthed, as a like submission thing, to be like, I'm gonna do some stuff, but it's just play.
Yeah.
And so my question is, why are we so crap at play cues?
As human adults.
As like. So we've just said that sometimes a portion of our job, we think, is explaining play cues around, or explaining what appropriate play cues are,
or responding
to play cues that other children might not pick up on, but we as an adult can go, oh, that person's asking for something, maybe I'll go and facilitate a need there. Why don't we have, as an animal, a thing that is like, hey, their eyes are open and their mouth's open, therefore playing.
Because
we have
our
this
brains are
whole
more
subtlety
sophisticated.
of like, hey, yeah, but their eye contact wasn't there. Oh, but they were slightly turned towards you. Oh, but they're like, no wonder children sometimes misinterpret play cues. It's so and maybe that's just, maybe the animal kingdom is more complex and we just don't see the complexities of it.
I would say it is, because even like, so dogs have their play bow, which is a kind of well-known thing where they kind of put their four legs down. But even still, because I've just got a dog, I'm kind of observing this all the time.
Yeah.
Even with that really obvious, like, I am playing, let's play, the other player doesn't always accept that play cue, even though they probably can say, I know you're playing, but I don't want you anywhere near me. I'm going to growl at you and snap my teeth or whatever. Or, I will play with you for a bit, but now it's stopped. Or now you want to play in chasing way, but I'm going to play in a knock you over type way. So even with those really obvious, like, I'm just playing, here's a play bow, doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be like, cool, I'll give you a play return and then we'll loop and flow and it'll just be fine until it's annihilation time and then goodbye, see you later. It's like, do you know what I mean?
I do. That was my kind of like...
It's really interesting because you picked out bits that I like read quite early on and kind of forgotten about.
There was a statement in there that I really liked, which I thought was is a very simple sentence, but very impactful if you actually take it on board.
Yeah.
And it was something along the lines of play workers consider and like choose with intention
Oh yes.
their
I thought you might like that
interactions
bit.
with the
Yeah, man.
obviously my jam is like intentional things.
Yes.
I like doing that stuff, but I was like, ooh, that's, if you had that as like one of the teaching principles or one of the forest school principles, that like, you know, leaders choose their interactions with the children intentionally.
Yes.
It would just tweak something
Yes.
in everybody's approach that would go, I've just got to think about whether I'm doing this intentionally and what my intention is. And
absolutely.
like a risk-benefit analysis, you could have like an intention-benefit analysis, where you would just think about like, oh, I am going to go and talk to that person. Why am I going to talk to that person? What am I risking by talking to that person? So I really thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
When you have this understanding of the play cycle going on in your head, it impacts your intentionality. It impacts what you think is a risk. And you yourself have said this last couple of weeks, you keep walking around and going past me and going, there's too many play cycles going on and I'm seeing them all and I don't know what to do.
Not as in I didn't believe there were too many play
No,
cycles.
no,
it's just that when you're aware of them and you
Yeah.
see them, you're like, okay, this is completely fascinating. So and so is in this play cycle of this, but over there that's happening, and it also makes you completely like, I'm not going to say overthink, because I don't think there's such a thing as overthinking, even though it is hard work. Your role in the whole play. So you're like, okay, well, I kind of thought we were going to like tell a story at some point today.
Yeah.
But if I like stop everyone right now because we said we were going to do a story, then I'm stopping that play cycle at that point and this one over here at that point. And who am I to do that? And la 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 la. But then we'd never do anything, and we'd never like have lunch because, you know. But yeah, that kind of play worker's role as kind of facilitating and holding space for completed play cycles. That's the goal. That's the therapeutic goal. That if somebody is always having their play cycle interrupted, they never have that free space and time, and they never play out the material that's inside them, that's when sort of problems happen. So it's kind of our role to facilitate and enable those things to come to their natural end.
And I was asking you this week about, so when all the theory and stuff about play cycles is written from like a single player's kind of like perspective. You know, it's the person has the interlude, the person sends the play cue, it is then returned, and it's kind of implied it's returned by an adult or another child or something else, and then it goes back to the one. You know, it's like individual centered. And I was asking you about like, well, what happens when there's 5 children playing all together in a cooperative group? Because you might be interrupting someone's super valuable play cycle. You know, one of them might be going, this is everything I need. This is like super therapeutic for me. And some of them might be going, yeah, I have watched Harry Potter and I kind of know what's going on with wands, and that's kind of fun to move my stuff around. And like whether there's a hierarchy of cycles or whether it's like...
I would argue that there isn't. I would argue that I think... I'm
not arguing there is, but I'm just thinking things.
Completely. And we had this discussion the other day, didn't we? Because I think that even the kid who's like, okay, I'll kind of go along with this, I guess. It wasn't really my idea, but I'm kind of, you know, they like loads of stuff is happening for that person. Loads. You know, they're kind of observing and watching, okay, where's my place in the group here, and what's my role, and how much do I want to be told what to do, and how much am I going to tell other people what to do, and how am I going to respond and react, and when am I going to say, actually no, I don't think that should happen, or no, I don't like this anymore, or when am I going to step out, or when am I going to continue?
Presumably though, you could have, so let's take the example where there's 3 people playing in a game. You could have one person for whom the play cycle is like absolute flow. I'm not even thinking about this stuff. I understand the rules, and I have this good social relationship that means that I know, hey, I throw this out, and I know that the partner will send it back, or the other person will send it back. But you can have another person in that 3 for whom the same play is an incredibly stressful play cycle because it's unfamiliar to them. They don't have the same social things, the same social like credit to use. So where in 3 people playing a game, and it could be like a game of chase, let's say, one person can be going, this is absolute flow for me, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and interrupting that play cycle would be kind of like, oh, I've interrupted something that you were super in. Someone might be having a very stressful play cycle in exactly the same experience, and when interrupted might go,
Oh, thank goodness.
that was actually me running at 6,000 RPM. I was about the top of what I could do. I'm really glad of a change. So how do you respond to those kind of things? How do you just have to watch to go, who is this play cycle easy for, and who is finding this play cycle tricky? Is that all you have to do?
I think so, and I think not necessarily make assumptions, and that the longer you are doing this kind of job, then the easier it is to let people be uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? If you don't know kids very well, or you haven't been doing it very long, then the minute somebody looks a bit troubled when they're playing, or looks a bit like they're having a hard time, or they are actually stressed out, or they are actually frightened in a slightly scary game, I think the quicker you are to go, are you all right? Do you want to come and help me do the bloody blah, actually? Because you just want to like look after people all the time and protect them. You don't want them to have a bad experience. And then the longer you know somebody, that you go, actually, I can let you.
You understand their language a little bit more. You understand, like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and you also see the value of a completed... You've got
a few more spoons left to use.
Yeah, and you see the benefit of a completed play cycle, even if it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows the whole time for somebody. Do you know what I mean? So if they found it really hard, but they get to the end of it and it comes to its natural end, that who are you to make that judgment call about, like, oh, that wasn't their play cycle, that was somebody else's, that they were kind of... Because you don't know what's happening in the inner world. And there are times when you go, oh, God, I really think that... I think you've made a comment about a kid recently going, God, they're just so resilient. I've just been observing them. And, and play often doesn't go, like, their way, in inverted commas. But they just, like... And, if you didn't know that person very well, you'd be like, oh, gosh, that was quite a tough experience. And you might go, oh, I'm going to make sure that I... really, really super help that person, but actually you keep watching and you're like, whoa, they're actually okay, they're really thriving, they're just, that's who they are right now, they're just kind of I really like the stuff about, so there's the it's a separate paper called Transactional Analysis and the Ludic Third.
Oh, the Ludic Third.
My God.
That was the thing this morning that was absolutely making my brain hurt.
So that is a paper in its own right, and I think you can probably get it on the internet. In fact, I'm sure you can. Whether it's behind a paywall or not, I don't know. But this is all about, like, functional fluency, and Lewis's eyelids are flickering. I love it. And it's got some lovely diagrams, what I have copied into my little book with my biro pen. Oh my God. No, but it's kind of going back to what you're saying about being intentional.
Oh, it's super interesting. It's just dense.
It's like, okay, so what is a good play work? What is good play work practice? But it's also kind of what it is to be a great forest school leader, to be a good parent, to be a good person who works with people in the world. And so there's this diagram which is very hard to explain, but it's kind of like it's in different sections, like guiding and directing and looking after people is at the top of the diagram, for example. So both of those things you could definitely say is part of a forest school leader's job.
There's a little vole on the floor.
A vole?
Under that log.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a shrew, I think.
Is it a shrew?
Yeah, it's a shrew. It's quite big. Yeah, so guiding, directing and looking after people are both part of forest school leaders' job, for sure. And at the negative end of those aspects of human life are dominating on one side, being bossy, finding fault, being punitive. At the other end, but still negative, is marshmallowing, really like overindulgent, smothering people.
Being too hard, being too soft.
Exactly. Whereas at the positive end of those things are structuring and nurturing. So structuring being inspiring, well organised and firm, nurturing, accepting, understanding and compassionate. So there's that's the good end of guiding, directing and looking after people. And in the middle is the accounting kind of state of mind, where you're alert, aware, assessing, aware of inner and outer worlds, and based in current reality and being rational and evaluative. So this paper argues that as a play worker you want to be in the accounting state. as much as possible. You're in the here and now. You're not thinking about like what happened last week with that person, or what happened when you were a kid. Oh, when I was a kid I had a really bad experience with that, so
what
I don't want
with
you
that
to
other
have
group?
that thing.
I've done that last year and we did that thing.
Yeah, exactly. And not in the future of going, oh God, if this happens, then this could happen in the future. Just in the here and now, completely alert, aware, assessing for risk, all those kind of things, and being rational and evaluative. And then other bits are relating to others and doing my own thing. And so the good bit of relating to the others would be being cooperative, friendly, assertive, considerate. Being negative would be anxious, rebellious, submissive, or compliant, like compliant resistant, basically.
Yeah.
Doing my own thing would be good. Positive side of that is spontaneous, creative, zestful, and expressive. Negative is egocentric, reckless, selfish, and immature. So these are all designed by someone called Susanna Temple, who wrote this paper with Pete King. It's the 9 models of behaviour under the functional fluency model. And I really liked this as because in Bob Hughes' evolutionary play work, which we also did a podcast about, there's a lot in there about types of play worker, but I really like this diagram in terms of like all of us have these sides to us, and all of us have days where we're going to fall more into one of these things,
or situations that's kind of nudge you, because that's part of, I think, what's interesting about forest school and play working is this acknowledgement of like you as a human. I've always said that one of the things I really appreciated coming out of teaching, like state teaching, was this thing of like no personal stuff. You know, you can be like crazy, you could use a different font if you want, but like you're not really a 3D person.
You could teach the PowerPoints in a different order. The PowerPoints that you haven't even written, that you've been given, not even by your department, but maybe by an external consultancy.
But Playworking Forest School have this thing where they're like, acknowledge you as part of the process, part of the community, and you're not above influence or, you know, it's not wrong to go like, do you know what's rainy today? And that's making me, you know, feel different or not particularly want to. Like, on a sunny day, hey, guys, I'm happy to like get on the scramble net with you and do this and, you know, maybe play some chase games. And then you go, do you know what? I haven't actually had as much in my lunchbox as I would have liked today, so I'm probably not going to do any chasing. And that's okay to acknowledge yourself as part of it. I mean, if you kept being like, no, I don't want to, then I think you'd have to assess it and go, you're not looking after yourself. But in the moment, you're not above kind of checking in with where you are before you go, and how will that impact my next interaction? Yeah, it's all that
reflective thing, isn't it? Completely. Yeah. And I like in this book it talks about being in the witness position. So as play worker or forest school leader, I think you're the witness to the stuff happening, which means that you are facilitating all the play that needs to happen and reflecting on it and your own influence upon it, and that you're able to keep your own kind of anxiety and fears and expectations in check. And it's almost like mindfulness. It's like just living in the moment and just going, and like you say, not beating yourself up if you have a thought about like, ooh.
Yeah. There's one of the thoughts I had at the start about the metalude, actually quite a lot through this book, they're talking about, so the play cycle is split in half, and the metalude happens in the inner world, and then the cue happens in the outer world. So it's kind of internalized, and then the return happens in the outside, but then flow and loop happens back inside the internal world. And there's lots in this book about like preserving the like boundary of that internal world. Like, you're not, as the play worker, we are not supposed to go into that world. We're not supposed to think that we can go into that world. We're not supposed to try and go into that world, which I think is really interesting. When you think about, so the thing that came up when I was thinking about metaludes is like springboards, which is kind of the way that you would go set up an activity, ba-dum. You know, hey, here, the springboard is a story, and as forest school leaders we're going, I imagine this will lead into den building, or I imagine this might think, but, and whether we, you know, I think this is something that forest school leaders would do maybe subconsciously, or not necessarily thinking about it in academic terms, but when we set up a springboard as opposed to a craptivity or a directed activity, the reason that we're framing it as a springboard is because we're respecting that internal world and going, I can only affect what happens in the external world. I can only affect what's on the table. What I can't impact is what your brain you the learner, your brain does with the information of there's a hammer on the table.
Yeah, which could be nothing.
Which
I
could
can
be
accept...
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, it's like, and that's where I think I see stuff that I find, I'm going to just say difficult to watch. If you have stuff where it's like, I've left out nails and hammers and bits of wood, and the bits of wood have all got like a dot to dot on it, and the idea is that you put the nails on the dots.
You do that every day, don't you? That kind of play invitation.
Play invitation. But then what I
It doesn't.
But then what I find difficult to watch is then people going like, that's not what we're doing with that tool today, or that's not. If it's like risky, like you want to go twat someone in the head with it,
or destroying something that cannot be destroyed right now.
Or destroying something, you know, those things are kind of different. They're outside. What I'm talking about is like somebody who wants to just put nails everywhere. Somebody who wants to actually use the back end of the hammer and see if that makes divots in it, because you have, as a reflective, kind of respectful forest school leader, you're just looking at it as going, all I can do is put hammers on the table, and I can do something next to you, which again is another springboard, but I can't tell you what your brain's going to do with Gemma is sat next to me and she's putting screws into the table, because it might be, I'm going to kick her in the shin. Like that might be the metalude that comes from that scenario.
For you. So play that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a really interesting way of framing it. When we talk about springboards, is that respect for inner world of going, do you know what we can affect? We can affect the outer world. You know, we can't affect children's inner world, and we have to really understand that. And that then feeds into that cycle of like planning around children's needs and views, and kind of, you know, every observation that we make is built on a collection of kind of remembering what their inner world did with previous information we gave them. That's all we're doing, I think. Once you frame it in this kind of play cycle thing, it's like, oh, last time you had that information and your metalude was this. Might be the same, might not be the same, but I'm building up more information about your inner world.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Absolutely. And also inevitably you are affecting, like, things that happen in the play space are affecting the inner world for the future as well, and you don't necessarily have control over that. You know, it's like stuff, not just stuff that you have planned or done or said is affecting the inner world of that child, like stuff that you won't even be aware of because they're just like playing at the bottom of the hill and you can see them but you can't hear what they're talking about, and you don't necessarily, you know, you don't know everything, you can't know everything. There's a whole bit about the play cycle observation method, which I guess comes back around in a circle to like, here's the play cycle, it's a thing, lots of people in play work have gone, yeah, cool, the play cycle, but it hasn't necessarily had much interrogation or research to back it up. And so then so I think I told you don't necessarily read this.
I didn't.
No. So in Précis, there are forms in there to fill out. There is a way of evaluating and observing play cycles. So not evaluating, recording. So you would watch it. So Pete King talks about doing it with some students at Swansea University, and they're watching video, so 5 minutes of video, and they're told to focus on one child first of all and observe what's the play cue, what's the play return, how long does the play cycle last, how does it end, and then note it down, and then do it for the other children in the video.
In the same scenario, so watch the same video over and over.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then so you can use the resources in the book in your setting if you want to, and observe the play cues, the returns, the adult intervention, the length of the play cycles, how they end, and then there's actually some maths there to work out things like the percentages of play cues issued by certain children.
Okay.
And how often they get a return. So after you've done it, you can go, oh, blimey, like...
This person is not getting stuff returned, or is getting everything returned. Yeah,
exactly. And so that can give you an indication of children's involvement, and you can see kind of dominant children in the play space, kids that aren't giving any play cues, or very few, and you're like, okay, why is that? And so that can give you information to for your kind of setting up your resourcing of your play space, all that kind of stuff.
it strikes me that you could do a really interesting graph. Have you seen when you have like, so sometimes people do it for films. They have all the characters around the outside of like a circle, and then every time two characters have a conversation, they draw a line, and then the thicker it, and so there's not to get really like woke about it, but there's a lot of stuff where I can't remember the name of the person, but they do this test on films where they're like, do two female characters talk about anything other than anyway.
Yes.
So you could have one of those graphs, but you could do everyone in your group. If you had a small enough group, and you could record it all, and you think you could accurately do whatever, you could do something where you're like, child A and child D, they ping back play cues loads and loads and loads. Child D only did a couple with child F, but child F had a really strong connection with. You could have this like pinging spiderweb diagram of like, where are the strongest. Now, would you say that? Just as I got to this point in the sentence, I stopped. Does more returned play cues indicate a stronger relationship, or just an understanding of each other's play cues?
Ooh, what a great question.
Yes, I did it.
I don't know. I want to do it. I want to do the mapping.
Do you understand? Because they're different things, aren't they?
Completely.
You could return lots of someone's play cues. And still not have a particularly strong, what you would call like a strong relationship. And
what I find fascinating, especially now that our provision runs 2 consecutive days for one of our groups, is that some days people do that ping 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 all day, and then
do you mean like 2 people will do it together?
Yeah, and be just in this like. Well, like play cycle after play cycle,
this is our own thing.
Just in their own world for a whole day, and then the following day, to the point where if you didn't know them,
you think they'd have fallen
you'd
out.
go, these people are the best friends. They haven't really spoken to anyone else. They must be absolutely best buddies. And the next day, they're kind of like, you're right, and that might be the only interaction they have all day. And it'll be like a different link up, different relationship with somebody else that day. I find that. And
sometimes, so I think this is worth saying, because people might be listening to this and kind of going like, oh yeah, I understand, because the example we gave was you jump out on someone and go ha ha, and then the other person goes ha ha, or whatever. But 2 children sitting on a log chatting for an hour or so, let's say hypothetically 2 children did that, and you and I kept going over and going, are they still chatting? Yeah, they're still chatting. Well, they're just sat on the log talking to each other.
They've moved from the log to the swing, but they're still talking.
Which, again, go back to our vestibular podcast, because they were meeting vestibular needs, because the play was entirely verbal. So it was all just about like chat, about talking things, about hypothetically, talking about like video games that they may or may not have ever played. So to meet the physical side of it, they were also swinging. They were kicking their legs on the log or whatever. But the play cycle was entirely verbal, and just went on and on and on. And that is I think that could be a misconstrued thing of like play is, physical is role play. But that's not necessarily. Play is
communication play.
Communication play is everything else. I talked to you a little while ago, and I asked you about play cues, and I said, so lots of children's play cues, and lots of adults will use this play cue as well, where they go up essentially to someone they're not playing with, and behind them they go, "Ah!" Or some children will take that even further and will just physically hit someone, and that is their play cue. And I was asking if that if that gets the result that the person who goes rah, or the person who goes no whatever, because that in an unavoidable way stops whatever play cycle the recipient is going through. So if you and I are having some communication play, we're chatting just like we're doing now, we're going through, and someone comes up behind me and goes rah, I don't really have an option but to stop the play cycle we're in and turn around to that person. And in some ways, that gets the person who said rah, they've got what they wanted, which was, I'm now involved in them and their play cycle. And my response is either, what are you doing? Or I go, oh, let's do that again and chase me. But it's not sometimes, like with the hitting, with the hitting. It's not a comfortable play cue to watch as leaders, because we see the other play cycle going on, and you see someone arrive and just going rah or punching or in any other way steamrollering the cycle that is going on, and just going like, fuck this, I've got a play need, whose game?
But do you think they're really thinking fuck this? I don't think though. I think it's very rare for somebody to be going fuck this.
What
It's
sense?
just like, have a thing. Here's the thing to the world. There's not necessarily an awareness of like, oh, I can see that those people are involved in a play cycle of their own. I am going to steamroller it.
No,
Check
I
me
disagree.
out.
I disagree.
You think so?
I think there are definite
Deliberate sabotage.
I think especially at a social level, there are definitely some, and you can, maybe I'm laying stuff on that isn't necessarily happening, but I think I've definitely seen for over the years examples of like, hey, that person was my best friend yesterday and now they're playing with so and so, and so I'm gonna like disrupt their play cycle and keep going. So, you know, two people are I don't know, let's say two people are in the digging hole and digging, and there's someone on the outside who thinks that one of them, actually that's my best friend, why are they digging with that person? And so they'll keep running over and like throwing pine cones at that person, or trying to pull them away, like, hey, do you want to come do this thing with me? Or like, hey, I'll let you do that thing that you wouldn't I couldn't let you do yesterday, but now I'm actually okay with it. Like this bargaining play cue of like, I actually need you to be involved in my play cycle, and so to do that I have to disrupt the play cycle that you're currently in with this other partner. So I do think there's an element of I need to break your play cycle.
Yeah,
not
I guess,
at a conscious level.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like that he's playing with him. I want him to play with me.
I guess that's kind of where our role comes in as sort of emotional coaches and social coaches. So a lot of our kids now have definitely learned kind of respectful ways to deal with that. So kids that have been here for longer and are able to in the moment are able to turn to the person who's maybe disrupting the play cue that the play cycle they're currently in and go, I don't want to play that right now. And continue where they were. And you know, we talk about this kind of like, oh, you know, and if that has an emotional effect, a negative emotional effect on the person who was issuing the extreme
because their play cue hasn't been returned,
then kind of helping, like coaching them through those feelings as well, and going, just because they don't want to play right now doesn't mean they never want to play with you. It just means that they're doing that right now, or they just don't want to play that right now, or they just want to play with 3 people at the moment, but let's see what everyone else is doing, or I could use some help with this, or whatever. So supporting, and that is part of life, isn't it? So if you were just kind of, I mean, you can't preserve a play cycle in a special glass box so that it's got no interruptions. That interruption might not be a person steamrolling play, it might be a woodpecker flies past your head, or the thing you're playing with breaks.
Maybe that's what I feel is maybe missing from this book, is like, in the play cycle the options are the play is destroyed, the play cue is returned. Those are the two. From the like, person has play cue, play is either destroyed or returned, which makes sense if you're looking at it from the perspective of the person trying to disrupt an existing play cycle, because they're coming in with their own play cue. Either it gets returned or it gets killed off. But for the people already in a play cycle, I'm not sure I necessarily understand how an extra play cue coming in from the side, if you like,
well, I think it either gets
into their circle.
I think it either gets taken up, because sometimes it does get taken up. That's the thing as well, isn't it? You have an interruption. You're like, hell yes, that looks fun. I'm going to stop that other thing and do this thing now, you know. But there is a discussion of display, with a Y, being what happens when a child has unplayed out material, not enough completed play cycles, and all of that unplayed out material coming out in other ways which are potentially antisocial or disruptive. And I am really interested in that at the moment, and really interested in, like, in inverted commas, antisocial play cues of the type that you're describing, and thinking about children that we've had here, and everyone knows kids like this and adults like this that just are in this thing where the play cues they're giving just are not taken up because they are seen as being antisocial. The play cue is repeatedly throwing a pine cone at somebody or shouting at someone in their face. And, you know, you get this in every age. It's not just like, you know, it's a real common toddler thing, but can be right up into adulthood, I'm sure. And it's like how you help those people to be able to have more successful play cues without going, you're being rude.
What you're doing is wrong.
You're being disrespectful. Because who are we to say that that's rude or disrespectful? Especially with neurodivergent young people. It's like,
absolutely.
well, you know, yes, it's rude in inverted commas by neurotypical standards, but you know, it's bullshit to turn around to someone and go, you're being rude. That's not our judgment call to make. It's our role, if that person's play cues are repeatedly not being picked up and that's having a damaging psychological effect on them, or their play cues are so violent that they are significantly disrupting other children's play cycles and having an adverse effect on them, then it's our role to support that child or young person with those play cues. Whether it is responding ourselves, so going, oh, actually, when they threw that pine cone at me, it kind of did hurt my leg, but right now is not the time to start lecturing about throwing. Yeah. Right now is the time to go, oh, right, I'm going to come get you, and like chase them so that they have a successful opportunity to get into the loop and flow stage. Yeah. And get that unplayed out material out.
Do you think, I would like you to respond with like, oh, I definitely agree, or I disagree, or it's more complicated, why have you made this a stupid question, or a stupid statement maybe. Only children have the right to interrupt, the like unequivocal right to interrupt others' play cycles. Because we talked a lot about adult intervention and adulterating play and how that's very negative and you mustn't put your own things on the play. But then we're also saying that children, other children, have a right to interrupt existing play cycles because they might get picked up. So, statement again, only children have the unequivocal right to interrupt ongoing play cycles or existing play cycles.
Oh, it's such a tough one, isn't it? As I said, I've been thinking about this loads recently, and it's like, well, me bellowing a song about it's snack time is inevitably interrupting play cycles. However, if I don't do that and I end up with a number of very hungry children who have been playing completely oblivious to their body's needs, or it's starting to chuck it down with rain and nobody's put their coat on and now they're all soaked to the skin because they've been completely in flow and I haven't interrupted people's play cycles to advise.
But I think there's a slightly different examples, because I understand that you can interrupt for there's a benefit to be had. The risk is I'm going to disrupt this play cycle, but the benefit
that's it. It's a dynamic risk assessment,
right?
Because interrupting the play cycle is a risk. If we believe that it is psychologically important to complete a play cycle, then every time you are disrupting that, there is a risk of harm. Just in case you weren't already like overthinking your role with your kids.
Every interruption of a play cycle.
Intentional work.
But so there's a lot of movement. I'm just floating things now. So there's lots of movement about what's the stupid line that is like, you don't get old because you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about this thing, and adults have play cues. They're just different play cues. So in a setting where we're saying that I'm playing devil's advocates here.
Yeah, love it.
So, hello Bumblebee. Where we're in a setting, we're acknowledging that we are part of the community. We're acknowledging that you can't pretend we don't exist. All these things. Why? I think I know the answer to this already, but I'm going to let you answer it. Why are our play needs? So children can interrupt each other because they have play needs and they might get their play returned. Adults cannot interrupt children with their own play needs and cannot dominate the play. Is that just because we have an innate kind of like dominance because we're bigger, because so our play cycles would dominate if we brought them into that setting?
I think it's about finding the balance. So if you go back to the diagram that I was talking about before and the functional fluency, if you're being like inspiring and friendly and zestful and creative and expressive in your behaviour, that's one thing. If you're going, which could involve like, oh yeah, no, that thing does look like wings, whee,
Yeah.
as I did this week. So that is me issuing a play cue and doing it, and maybe unintentionally interrupting some other play cycles as I whoosh past some other people playing Harry Potter with my muddy tarpaulin wings. But if you're going, right, everyone do it like this, you're doing that, yeah, you be this, and I, you know, and you're dominating.
Because that's how children sometimes play with each other.
Yeah.
So
but they are children and we are adults with with, you know, our lifetime's worth of experience and awareness, and we've got the ability sometimes to control our impulses. Do you know what I was doing last night? I was throwing orange at my family's face. They were like after tea. It's like, you know, the game where you try and throw some food in someone's mouth. So it started out as that. I was just throwing segments of orange at my family's faces.
You didn't say segments of orange, and so you just said I was throwing an orange at my family's face, like a full cricket ball orange,
like a segment. And I really recommend it because it's something about the
what
shape.
A sticky mess.
I know, it's something about the shape and the weight of a segment means that when it bounces off a full head, it is the most hysterical thing ever, and very, very funny. Yeah. So, you know, was I dominating that? Yeah, probably. Was that some unplayed out material of mine? Well, definitely, most definitely.
Well, I think that's what I was then, as you were saying.
Their family, so they don't count.
So family is a different setting, isn't it? Where you are kind of like, not exactly, but you're more equal players. If we're looking at this as like, we're facilitating a service, we're facilitating a thing as professionals, then in the same way that, like, I don't know, if you were going to the bank and halfway through your appointment about your mortgage, they went, oh, I'm just going to check on mine.
Yes.
That would be the equivalent. Or like, you're at a restaurant
like
and the person sat down next to you and said, I'm actually on my lunch break right now, so I'm going to eat with you. We're in a service role in that point. So we are parking our own, to a greater or lesser degree.
Yes.
We are, which kind of goes against what I was saying earlier about really enjoying this job because it allows you to be.
No, because I think all those sort of interactions where you could view it as you are playing out your unplayed out material here, and you are dominating, and you are riding roughshod over all these play cycles. You could look at those interactions actually as relationship building, as getting to know the children that you're working with, as being inspiring and creative and successful, and all the rest of it. Depending on what glasses you're wearing, do you know what I mean? And I wonder actually how different a family setting is, because I was just thinking, like, okay, what would be an example of what you're just saying? Like, in a family, you maybe have a bit more leeway to go, like, no, but guys, I really want to do this thing. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we do go, like, at the start of the day when we want to play like a big game or whatever. Sometimes we go, does anyone want to play this game? Okay, no one wants to play this game. Well, I'll just explain to you. But sometimes you go, do you know what, guys? I'd really love it if we could just test it out, because I've never played this game before, or I just invented it. Would anyone be willing, you know, and just like push it a little bit more and go, I do actually have a need to play this game. Would anyone like?
Would you describe that as like strong and weak cues? So weak cue would be like, anyone want to play this? And a strong cue is like, whilst you've got like, you're doing the circle of check-in, we've still got everybody's attention very momentarily. Yeah. And we kind of go, okay, I want to use this to pitch. And so I want to make this strong play cue of like, if you would really like to, let me do. Yeah. You know, we've invested more behind it. They can feel that we're invested more behind it.
Yes.
In the same way that children probably can pick up on each other's play cues of like, that person's just walked past me and thrown a thing. They're not really fussed whether I return that or not. Or that person's just walked past and gone like, hey, poo-poo brain, and walked past. You know, they're just, it's a throwaway play cue. And then there are some where, you know, someone goes like, you're my cat now.
Yeah. And
they stand next to that person.
Yeah.
And wait, and there's kind of this like this is a heavy play, this is a strong play cue. I need a direct answer. I need a response one way or the other. Very.
Yeah, I know. And you and I will often check in and go, is this like a wolf call moment? Is this like a bring the whole group back because we're doing this thing? Because we really need people to know what's going on right now? Or is this a kind of, not so strong thing of, I'm just going to start doing it, and if someone notices, like cooking, for example, if there's a cooking thing that relies on this stage having happened for the next stage to have happened, or like everyone needs to make their own dough ball because it's a very involved process, and if I just do it for everybody it's not going to work, or you know what I mean, that kind of thing. Like, do we stop everybody and go, hey, the cooking kind of has to happen now in this order, so if you want to eat something you all have to stop? Or is it I just start doing it, if someone notices then they'll join in and that's fine, or not, and that's also fine, because
and sometimes we're making that decision not necessarily completely based on the play cue we're about to start, but based on the play cycle that we're about to interrupt.
Exactly.
So we might in other scenarios, if they're kind of milling, there's some play cycles are winding down, people are looking a bit whatever, then we go, hey, cooking, that's the cue. Hey, anyone want to cook? You might be doing exactly the same recipe. It might be exactly the same thing of like, it has to happen now if they want to eat. And we make the opposite call where we go, shall we just not eat today? Not
just not cook. Today's not the day.
Shall we just not cook today? Because what they're doing down there is really important.
Can you imagine having that level of reflective thought and in the moment analysis on your own? Like, there's people listening to this
you can do it.
who are doing that.
Or it would be they're so difficult.
Credit to you, oh my God, because the amount of times that we do that per day and go you've seen different things to me. You've been down the hill, I've been up the hill. Is now the right time to bloody blah, or do we just not do that? Or what's the and the longer we work together, the more we kind of don't have to necessarily do that out loud, because we both get the vibe. Like today we were doing toddler group and there just wasn't time for one of the things that we said we were going to do, because we focused more on...
They're like ships in the night conversation where we're both walking past each other and we just this is going to... okay. But that level of, and things that we've talked about before about part of our practice that we go, no, we are going to continue that routine. Like, there aren't that many things that we do, but the checking in circles in the morning, we have tried it without, and on balance right now we go, whatever the potentially negative impact of stopping people's play cycles to call everybody to the check-in circle, the risk is greater by not doing it, even though it is impactful. I think it's one of those things where if we were in I'm very envious of people who walk to their site with their group. They meet the group somewhere, they walk to the site, because essentially doing that walk, I think you can do the check-in circle during that walk
before any play cycles
before any like non-community, people are having a chat, so there are play cycles going on, but you arrive at the site with already a gauge of how people are doing. Not just you, the leaders, but the peers know how each other is doing. They know what each other have had for breakfast. They know what they've watched on TV. Those kind of things when they arrive. But because at our site the children are dropped off here and they're straight into play cycles, and sometimes the most difficult play cycle happens in that first bit, because I think one of the benefits of the circle is trying to encourage them to go, don't just say your own thing and go, and like mentally go, daydream, do whatever, chat, to go like, you might go and try and play cue with that person later, and it's important for you to know that he hasn't had breakfast, or it's important for you to know
just died,
that they're super excited, they're full of energy. So if you don't want to play in that kind of style, maybe, it's super important. So yes, it does disrupt play cues, but it also facilitates, I was going to say better.
No, I don't mean more successful play.
More successful play cues. That's a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
Those are kind of all of the thoughts I have. On this book.
Same. I mean, they're not, but that's all the stuff that I can express right now.
Sometimes we talk about, would you put this in like a level 3
training
syllabus? Would you?
I'd say it's, as you said, it's pretty tough going. I would definitely recommend it to people who are maybe already interested in it and have read some other stuff beforehand.
Do you think you could do this?
From a nowhere.
This is an interesting idea, whether we could collectively do this as a forest school community. And I think it would be really interesting to decide these things. Whether you could have stuff that you go, these are the books that the forest school community recommends for new leaders. These are the books that forest school the forest school community recommends that leaders read in the first 2 years. These are what you need to read in the next 4 years. To extend your practice, but also to go, there's some progression here. You won't be ready for the concepts that are in. I don't think that people who have just done a level 3, who are coming out of teaching, which, let's be honest, has like a surface level interest in play at most, or someone who's come from, maybe they used to be a scout leader or something, to go to this book is too big. It's too big of a jump. It was almost too big of a jump for me as someone who, I was going to say, as someone who spends a lot of time with you and you tell me these things.
Well, a lot of time with kids playing.
And a lot of time with kids playing.
In a child-led setting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about what's the entry-level book. I tell you what. I forgot this. I kind of wanted to do one episode of the podcast talking about both this book and a new series of pieces of writing that are available for free on the internet about play work, written by some people whose name I haven't had enough coffee today. Oh my god!
Did they write it using letters?
They are called Ludicology. They are two blokes who live up north, and they're called Ludicology, and I can't remember their real names, but they've just written some papers. So maybe
if you know Ludicology, tell them we want to talk to them.
Yes, exactly. Well, I can try and
tell them we're looking for them.
So we should read that, and that I think is going to be the thing. That is the entry level bit of stuff you want to read before you go down the Bob Hughes evolutionary playwork route. Before you go down this route, read the Colorado paper that's on the internet, which kind of started the whole thing off. Wrap your lovely nashy nom noms around it and wallow in the loveliness.
It's a deep dive, isn't it? But hopefully this has been useful to some people.
Yes.
Perfect.
Cool.
I'm gonna go sit in the sunshine.
Me too.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.
And a massive thanks to our current patrons, Simon Kenny, Joe H, Brona Steed, Jude Vincent and Chrissy McEvoy. Thank you so much, guys. It really does mean a lot.